Professor Fisher, can you, tell us about your, experience and how it all started?
Sure. I've had a number of entrepreneurial ventures over my lifetime. I'm originally from the state of Michigan, which is a more rural area in Michigan. And so some of the kind of the catalyst to being interested in entrepreneurism is uh, having want to have some autonomy and being kind of in control a little bit. And that's particularly, I think, important, especially when you live in rural areas where you hear stories of things that are happening in New York, or things that are happening in London, or things that are happening in San Francisco. You're like, well, those are places I've never visited. Those are places that are not nearby. What can I, how can I be in kind of control? And so whenever you can identify an opportunity to do something new, it's an opportunity to learn, but also really to kind of, seize control of your life.
Hmm.
And that's an insight that I've developed over the years that I would not have answered that question the same way 10 years ago. I probably would have been like, oh, it was an interest in this or an interest in that. But as I've gotten older, I've started to really kind of reflect on that. And I think that my interest in entrepreneurial ventures and entrepreneurship and business, it has a lot to do with autonomy. Want to, really be in control of your destiny and be in control of life. So, working for a firm, even if the firm paid me more than what I would make on my own, I'd probably still work on my own, even if the firm paid more. So I really like that, and so that started for me pretty early. And so yeah, even when I was in elementary school, selling candy and gum to other kids, and then I had a computer bulletin board service and high school and an auto detailing shop my first year of college, um, and then I started investing in real estate while I was an undergrad. And then once I finished up my undergraduate work, went into basically lending, real estate, and financial services. And so that's where the bulk of my other businesses are related to that industry itself. And so that's really kind of where it would start. The root of it, I would have to say, is an interest in autonomy.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so you said the first business was selling bubblegum in middle school, or
Yeah,
okay.
I think it was in fifth grade. And so it's kids would, sticks of gum. Hey, I'll give you 50 cents for a stick of gum if you. And you're like, well, you'll pay for that? Well, hell, I'm going to stop off at the convenience store before I come to school. And so while I was in middle school, a kid who used to have like a $2 a week allowance, suddenly I was making like 40 bucks a week, selling sticks of gum and candy to other kids. And the big thing that I did that made it pretty successful is I'd get down to like my last 2 sticks of gum, and then I would auction them off. And kids are impressionable, so
Yeah.
fifth graders, they're like, yeah, I want that. I'd get lunch tickets, all these different things, things that are in school. So not a formal business, but really
Yeah.
that first kind of time of identifying an opportunity
Mhm.
and seizing it. And
Yeah.
it paid off pretty well. And, later on, some other kids kind of caught on, and I stopped doing it, I think around 6th grade or something like that. But that was kind of that first time of
Yeah.
recognizing an opportunity and again, just seizing it.
So you were kind of born with this entrepreneurial, culture in your mind, huh? Or you think people are born with it, or you develop it throughout the years?
Oh, well, I do think that is the $1 million question when it comes to almost any study is nature versus nurture. And uh, my family's not from money. We weren't destitute or anything like that, but um, the interest in entrepreneurial ventures and things and businesses that I started, there is definitely a nature dimension to it. In that I opened up my first year of college when I opened up an auto detailing shop. I opened that up on my own and never told my mom about it. And when she found out about it, she freaked. And that was just stuff. And even selling, candy and gum and all this stuff. That's stuff that I did. That was not encouragement from others. That was not a, hey, you should have, you should do. No, that was just, I identified an opportunity. And so definitely I had a little higher risk tolerance than maybe others would have. And the reason I throw out the fact that like I'm not from a family with money is I didn't have a lot of capital. So when there's little opportunities, if there was something I thought I could seize upon, I definitely did it. So there is that, that nature versus the nurture part. The nurture wasn't from a family with a lot of money, didn't have a lot of capital. Didn't mean I didn't have any, but I just didn't have much. But then there was that whole nature part of just, I didn't look to others for validation for that. Hey, is this okay? Yeah, like I said, when I opened up my auto detailing shop, my mom freaked when she found out that I'd signed a commercial lease.
Yeah.
And she got over it.
Wow. How old were you when you opened that?
Oh, well, that would have been my first year of college. So that would have probably been 19, 18 or 19. I can't quite remember. I've gotten to that point where I have a hard time remembering some of those, but yeah, either 18 or 19 years old, probably 19.
Wow. Okay. So, all these businesses, were they planned or they were accidental businesses? They happened just, because, were they accidental or not?
So the first ones are definitely more, well, the candy and gum was accidental. Just recognize that, hey, kids seem to like this. I can make money off of this. Okay. The auto detailing shop was more planned. I thought that there was an opportunity there. There was more planning involved with that. That was a more formal business. So yeah, I guess as I became a little bit more adept at knowing what I was doing at starting businesses and running businesses, a lot more planning came into the picture. But that selling candy and gum, and then even the computer bulletin board service that I had, those were accidental. Coming across what seemed like an opportunity, and it was something that aligned with something that I was kind of interested in, particularly the computer bulletin board service that I started in high school. I had a computer, I was interested in it. It was kind of a hobby. And hey, what do you know? People who live in more populated areas, they put modems in their computer and they call up these other places and there's all these things they can do. Well, can I do that here? Oh no, I live in too rural of an area. Well, let's change that. And so that was really kind of an accidental one. But again, as I've gotten older, it's definitely veers more towards planning because there's more risk involved as well. Yeah. But when you're young, I mean, and also the more capital that you have at risk, I definitely think that you're going to veer way more towards a lot more planning because you got more skin in the game. Again, when I was in 5th grade, if I'm selling sticks of gum, if they didn't sell, well, I've got gum for the rest of the week. I mean, it was like no big deal. And same thing with the computer bulletin board service. If I installed some new piece of hardware to make it better, I could still use it for my own personal use. So if it failed, it didn't matter. But again, getting a little into more formal businesses, the planning becomes way more important.
Do you think that those, computer bulletin boards and then the auto detailing shop, if you didn't start those, would you be here right now? Or, they kind of changed your career?
I think those two, the auto detailing shop, I only ran for a year. We didn't make a lot. We made some money, but didn't make a lot of money. And I transferred schools. So that one I don't think was particularly influential in my path. I think that the more influential ones start as I get a little bit later into investing in real estate, where these are, investing in assets that are not easy to liquidate or, to pick up and move. Renting out a garage to do auto detailing. I mean, there's not a lot of capital equipment or anything that you're investing in. Do it for a while. If you don't want to do it anymore, just shut it down. So those are things that were, hey, let's make some money. Hopefully we make some money is kind of the approach on that. But the ones that get me where I am, definitely that is once I got into college. That's where that starts to have more of an influence on my career path. And specifically, I'll kind of extend on that answer just a tad here. when I finished up my undergraduate degree, I majored in finance. And at one point, I was actually offered a job to be a trader on the floor of the Chicago Board of Options.
Wow.
But at that point, I think I had owned like 5 houses, and I hadn't owned them for very long. I had only bought them like in the last 2 years. And so that was a limiting factor, because while I was making a good amount of money off of these investment properties that I had bought, they hadn't appreciated it enough in value yet to sell them. So I ended up turning down the moving to Chicago to take that job on the Chicago Board of Options, because I would have had to sell all my investment properties, and it would have been at a loss. And I was making enough money off of these properties that I could accept a job in the Lansing area and make probably more money than I was going to make as a trader. So I stayed in the Lansing area. So that's where some of these entrepreneurial ventures started to have a real influence on the paths that I take. So me getting into teaching and eventually moving to California, that probably would not have happened had it not been for some events that happened in the 2000s. I ended up having a house fire in 2005, and the Michigan economy kind of basically collapses in 2006. And that prompted me to then consider moving elsewhere. But prior to that, I had built up a small real estate empire, and liquidating that was going to be really difficult. So the longer you do it, and certain ventures start to anchor you. And yeah, so later on, the influence is a lot. Those early ones, no, not quite so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so do you think that, so you said you were, how I say this, tight on money, and do you think that made you, pursue this, like go to like, entrepreneurial, ventures, or like, do you think like, the necessity of paying for college or for housing made you start these businesses?
It definitely did have an influence. So almost my entire life, I have worked in commission. Either I'm the business owner, and where what you make is the profits, or I've worked in jobs that are commission. Or when I was an undergrad, I waited tables and bartended, so all the money came from tips. So when I finished my undergraduate degree in finance, I started working in lending, and I worked as a mortgage broker. You only get paid when the deal closes. And what that means is that some months, I made a lot of money. And then I would have, and I remember specifically, I was June of, I think, it would have been 2001. It was June of 2001. I had a really good month, and I made like 12 grand, which for somebody straight out of college was a ton of money. But I had worked really, really hard, put in tons of hours to close these deals and get paid. The next month, though, my pipeline of business was basically dried up. So the next month, I only closed one deal. I only made $400 for the whole month. And so because of that variance in income, it drove me to invest even more in real estate, because the idea is that as you invest in these real estate properties and you get people in there, you start having a more steady stream of income. And I wanted to get to the point where I could live off of the money that came from my rental properties, so that I didn't have to be reliant upon that varied income that I would have from the work that I did. Because working in lending, you can do your job all the way, do your job perfectly, and then maybe the person who's buying the house gets laid off. In fact, that actually happened a few times. They get laid off like the day before the closing. You don't get paid now. Doesn't matter that you did your whole job, you did everything you were supposed to do. You're not getting paid now because the deal's not going to close. And even if that deal was like, oh man, I was going to make like $5 grand off of this deal. Yeah, you make zero now. And I know you did all this, effort and all this stuff. You make nothing. So that vulnerability to income did influence further investments in real estate. So yeah, there was some, kind of a, I don't want to say quite necessity, but it did, the environment had an effect.
Okay. So yeah, okay. Um, I know that, or personally, being young and, trying to start a business, I'm not taking seriously sometimes. And, you know, did you experience that? And yeah, did you?
Yes. Uh,
Okay.
I would say, particularly in the early days of starting my businesses and lending and whatnot, and then even in some of the real estate field, I remember I bought my first house and I rented out the extra bedrooms. Fine. The second house I bought, which was the very first, true investment property, um, I rented to other students, and so I show up and I'm renting to people that are my own age, and they're like, "Wait, you're our landlord?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." Um, and so I did have one time that might be true, might not be true. I did have a contracting crew. I needed to do some renovations on a property. I contracted with them, uh, paid them the deposit. They came, they worked one day, and then never showed up again.
Yeah.
And upon reflection, I think that maybe my age did have a little bit of an influence on their decision to basically abscond with or not fulfill the contract and abscond with some of my money. Whereas if I had been older, maybe that might not have happened. Might have still, it's possible, but I do think that there is you do have this period of time when you're young where those that are a little bit older, they really question if you know what you're doing. And when I worked in lending, you have to overcome that pretty quick. Particularly if you're going to do a mortgage for somebody to buy a house or refinance their home, you have to ask them a lot of personal questions. I need your social security number. I need to be able to pull your credit report. I know all of your debts. I know what your income is. Can I have your tax returns too? I mean, these are things you have to do
Yeah.
to do the transaction. And when you're like, 23 years old and your client is like 45, they're like, wait, I'm going to give you all of my stuff, and you're just out of college,
Yeah.
and so that's where it becomes really important that you know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And when you have knowledge and you know how to present that knowledge, you can overcome though that second guessing that you'll get from clients. But the trick is that if you don't know how to do that, if you don't have those kind of that confidence to talk and present and those kind of soft skills,
Hmm.
now we call it emotional quotient and all that sort of stuff, EQ. Back when I
Yeah.
was doing this, we didn't really quite know what that was yet, or at least not widely.
Yeah.
You have to develop that really, really fast. And if you can't, you won't succeed.
Hmm.
And so I did have a colleague of mine who was a really smart guy. He just didn't have that confidence, that sales, knowing how to talk to people and knowing how to adapt to different people. He didn't have that.
Hmm.
But he had the knowledge. He just didn't know how to package it. And he didn't succeed. He ended up exiting the industry, and I don't know what happened to him. He went off and did something else, but
Yeah.
that's one that I remember because I remember when he first started. He started not long after I had at this one particular firm, and I thought he was going to be wildly successful because I'm like, he's a smart guy.
Hmm.
He's not
So
dumb. He's definitely has more to learn, but I thought he was going to do well, and he just kind of didn't.
yeah, so that's as important as, your skills, right? Knowing how to sell it to people. Yeah.
I think that's quite honestly,
Yeah.
and I even hate admitting this. I think that's more important than the
More.
knowledge. If you don't know how to sell, it doesn't matter what you know. And I say that because at least in the industry that I'm referring to, the one that my business is in, most of my colleagues didn't know what they were talking about. Banking and lending in particular, people think that it's a banking job. People wear suits and they know what they're talking about. It's like real highbrow. Yeah, no, it's not. It's a sales job. It's a
Yeah.
sales job, which if you want to be good at it, you do have to know some finance.
Hmm.
But if you don't know any, you can still do well. And there are a lot of people in the lending industry, some areas, who they're really good at sales, They don't know much of anything about lending programs and guidelines and rules and underwriting and all the things that would normally you would think that a financial professional would have to have. They're just really good at selling. In fact, I think of one particular guy. I'll just use his first name. His name was Tom.
Okay.
Tom would, no joke, most of his day was spent at the bar. Why? Because that's where he met his clients. And Tom made a ton of money. He was wildly successful. And in fact, to the point that the guy who owned the office would joke with him. He'd go, "Hey, Tom, what are you doing here? Get back to the bar." As a joke, because he would always come back with, "Hey, got a new client from the bar, got a new client from the bar." I don't know if his liver is still held up, but that's where he met clients and he knew how to sell. And so he could come back with a client's name, their phone number, and all the stuff that you need to kind of get a deal rolling. Mm-hmm. And then he could do the finance stuff, but he didn't know the finance stuff.
Yep.
He let other people do that. That was the support staff who would do those things. And so while I knew way more than Tom did about the industry, Tom made more money than I did. He just did because he was that good at sales. So selling and knowing how to hold yourself out there and having the confidence, I think, is more important than the knowledge. But that's not to say that you can't not know things. Yeah. It just is, if we're going to prioritize which is more important, man, being confident and being confident to talk to other people is number one.
I mean, look at Steve Jobs, right? It's this case, exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and a lot of your entrepreneurs that are really successful, look at Elon Musk.
He knows his stuff, though. He knows the
things. He knows some things. Yeah. There's some other areas where you really would like to advise him, like, you should really listen to somebody else about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So was starting the bank the hardest business you've worked on?
So the wholesale bank that I started, which would be my last kind of entrepreneurial venture before entering into teaching, that one was actually not the hardest one. The hardest one would be when I started my mortgage brokerage and real estate sales firm. And it was the hardest one because that would be the first venture where I started to have a decent sized commercial office, started hiring staff, salaries and benefits and payroll and all these things. And I had to deal with that myself, along with licensing and all the different things that you would have to do. And so that was the more difficult one. Later on, when I started the wholesale bank, I did that with a couple of partners. I basically was already an expert in the field. I had a lot of experience. I had the connections. So that one was exhilarating. I really liked doing it, but it wasn't the hardest one to start. The hardest one was where I made that transition from, when I sold gum, when I had a computer bulletin board service, when I had an auto detailing shop. Those are businesses that I could basically run on my own. Even when I had a mortgage processing company, that was basically me. But once I started having a brokerage shop and then a real estate sales shop, I ended up having like between around 35 or 40 employees. They would kind of come and go between the two businesses, but I had a lot of employees and a lot of paperwork and quarterly tax filings and all these things that you might not really have had to deal with before you had all these employees, and dealing with all kinds of people coming in late, and a client shows up, hey, where's this person? They're not here yet. Oh, okay, well, I got to handle it. Back when I worked on my own, it was all me, so I didn't. That wasn't that difficult.
Do you think it's easier to work on your own, like start it on your own, or I'm till a certain point, right? It is, or because you're.
It depends on the business. So, I'm from Michigan. I grew up in a relatively rural area. I did my undergraduate work at Michigan State, which Lansing is it's not a huge city. It's still kind of a small city. Those areas, it's easier to do things kind of on your own, I think. But when you get out to more populated major metropolitan areas, you need more capital. Things are more expensive. The stakes are a little bit higher. There's more competition. And so I think maybe having partners and doing things with other people in more, major metropolitan areas is a little easier to do that way. More rural area, small operations. I think you can pull it off, kind of doing it on your own. At least it
So
works for.
yeah, I want to know, like, how many of these businesses you started them on your own or with partners?
So let's see here. The ones that I had partners with would be when I had an auto detailing shop. I did actually have a partner with that one. It was just another guy, or just a friend with me. When I had my computer bulletin board service, I had a friend who knew the actual programming stuff, some of the technical knowledge that I didn't have. He had that. And then the final one that I did, the wholesale bank, I did that with two other partners. And that's kind of the capital required and all the stuff that just kind of needed each other. But, selling gum, of course, that was me as a kid. My mortgage processing shop, my mortgage brokerage, my real estate sales firm, even my property kind of management firm, those I did on my own.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't need others for that. So I've had a little bit of a mixed bag, a little half and half.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard many times that the best team size, to start a startup is 2 to 3 people. No, 3 people. 3 people. Do you think that's true? And no?
I wouldn't say it's not true. It's one of
Like,
those
yeah.
context dependent. It depends on what you're going to do and probably where you're doing it. I think that you bring in partners when they've got something to offer. So yeah, if you're going to have 12 partners, oh yeah, I would clearly say, oh yeah, that's probably way too many cooks in the kitchen to be able to efficiently make decisions and run things. But yeah, having 2, 3, maybe even 4 partners, if they're bringing something to the table, it's fine. But if it's just you, let's say, with all the money and all the know-how, and a partner's not really doing anything other than they're just going to work with you, and you're having a partner just to have a partner, I don't know that that's really necessary.
Mhm.
But if they have some skills, some connections, capital, things that you don't have, where you really want your partners, I think, to be on as equal footing with you as possible, because inevitably some conflict will arise. It would be naive to not think that there's going to be conflict amongst partners.
Okay.
Best of friends, whatever it is, some point you're going to disagree about something. And if you're not on equal footing with each other, or you can't recognize, like, oh, maybe I put in most of the capital, but this person has knowledge in an area that I don't have. If you don't have something to compensate, then the partnership's probably not going to work out well, because you're just gonna be like, well, this is what I think we should do. And the other person goes, well, I don't think you should do that. And you go, yeah, well, I'm the one with all the know-how, and I'm the one with all the capital. I don't actually need you. So this is what we're doing. And of course that, is not probably going to play out very well. So there needs to be something where each person is contributing something significantly.
Exactly.
And go ahead.
Yeah, and no, and trust is essential here too. Yeah.
Yeah, the more
Right.
partners you have, the more you have to trust each other. If they're truly partners, they probably have access to the bank accounts, all that sort of stuff. And there's always stories of partnerships going bad as one partner doesn't trust the other one, or one partner empties out the account or something like that. So yeah, you don't bring on partners you don't trust. And so that would be the one kind of thing to kind of pull you back from being like, well, heck, let's just have 15 partners. Like, no, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So trust is definitely at the foundation, but trust is at the foundation of business, period. But it is particularly more important when it comes to partnership in a firm
Okay.
and starting a new firm.
Trust is essential, but how do you find partners? Yeah. So, there's two ways, right? Funding the company at the beginning with a co-founder, or finding someone later, right? Yeah.
So at least the way I've approached things, and oh gosh, I think every venture I've had, I'm really kind of the lead partner or the control partner. The person, so even though like with the wholesale bank, I did own 18% of that bank. So I wasn't the majority person, but I was the primary person who started up those operations. I had knowledge in this area. I knew that there was an opportunity, and the partners that I had, one of them already had a lending operation, a retail lending operation already started up. And so to take that business and kind of extend off of that was the path of least resistance. And so the reason I had an 18% stake is because the one partner, the guy, he's like, well, his retail lending operation was already in business. It already had a valuation. Like, I wasn't buying out his portion of that, and I wasn't buying into that. So, but I was in charge of the wholesale lending part. So that kind of like division was my baby. And so I've usually had the idea, or I've recognized that there's an opportunity, and then I start to seek out people that can help me get there quicker, or give me knowledge that I don't have or expertise that I don't have. So like even in high school, when I started a computer bulletin board service, I recognized that there was an opportunity there for some type of, I was a high school student then, so I didn't have the formal business knowledge I have now, but I recognized that there's an opportunity there. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know how to program some of the stuff that we needed, and technical knowledge. But I did know my buddy, his name was Luke. Luke did know how to do that stuff. Hey, Luke, you want to do a computer bulletin board service? You want to actually start one of these up? And he's like, yeah, I think I would like to do that. Cool, let's do it. You're in charge of that. I'm going to do, the branding, I handled a lot of the stuff, but he did the technical stuff because I really couldn't do that. Or the time it would have taken me to learn how to do that. It wasn't an area that I was particularly interested in, which makes learning even harder. So they filled a gap. And so that, I think, is how you should probably approach partners. Is it's not just like, let's start a business because it'd be fun and you guys are my roommates. It needs to be more along the lines of, what do you bring to the table? Yeah. And if you do that, I think you start off with a position of more trust, because you start to rely upon each other. They recognize that you're coming in with the idea and the marketing and the plan and the strategy, and they're doing this technical part, and they don't know how to do what you know how to do, and vice versa. Yeah. And so you create this kind of a symbiotic relationship. So I think you seek out partners when you identify gaps. And this is a challenge for entrepreneurs. To start up a new business, and especially your first one, you do have to put a lot of yourself into building the business. One of the errors that some entrepreneurs or business owners make is that, yes, they have to put themselves into the business to get it going and nurture it and grow it. But at the same time, they start to wrap their sense of identity up with the business. Yeah. And I sometimes call those people business owners and not necessarily entrepreneurs, because sometimes they will make some foolish decisions about their business because if the business fails, it means they're a failure. No, it doesn't actually mean that. You look at a business as, hey, some businesses I'm going to make money. I hope to make more money than less money. If the business isn't making money, well, then you kind of look at it, and if you think you maybe could make money in the future, then maybe you'll stick with it, but you shut it down. But businesses come and go. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that kind of differentiates a business owner from an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur kind of looks at it more like that kind of aloofness of like, I'll start this business up. If we make some money, cool. And if I ever get bored or I don't want to do it anymore, I'll sell it off or close it down and I'll go start another business.